Let's talk about JavaScript loops. Loop execute a block of code a number of times, or you can use loop for repeatedly execute code block for a specified number of times. There are different types of or kinds of loop. So let's say for in, for while, and do while. These are different kinds of loops available in JavaScript. For loops through a block of code as many times you want or you mentioned the code. For in loops through the properties of an object. For off loops through values of an iterable object. While loops through a block of code while specified condition is true. Do while also loops through a block of code while specific condition is true. So these are different types of loops in JavaScript. Let's look at one by one, and we'll begin with for loop. So what is for loop? For loop is basically used to repeatedly execute block of code for a specified number of times. This loop has three parts: the initialization, the condition, and you can see, and the increment or decrement part. So the first part is initialization part. This is condition part, and this is increment or decrement. It can be plus plus or minus minus. So the initialization step is executed before the loop starts, and it is used to set the starting value of loop variable. The condition part is checked before each iteration of the loop, and if the value evaluated true, the block code or code block is executed. And the last part is increment or decrement part is executed after each iteration of the loop and is used to update the loop variable. So this is a syntax for loop, and you can say console log I. This will print 1 to 9, and if I say 1 and is equal to, then we print 1 to 10. So the loop variable I is initialized to 1. The condition checks if I is less than or equal to 10, and then increments add 1 to I after each iteration. We can use this for loop to iterate over the elements of an array. Suppose if we have constant array equals array of fruits, apple, banana, and then cherry, and let's loop them through for loop, the condition will change. We say array dot length, and we print array, and we pass index of array. Refresh cherry, banana, because we have to start from 0 here to get all items: apple, banana, and cherry. So we are using loop variable I to access each elements of array, and the loop continues as long as the I is less than length of an array. So this is all about for loop. Let's take a look at for in loop. For in. So for in loop is used to iterate over the properties of an object, and it works by looping through the keys of an object and executing a block of code for each key. So let's say for in, I have to get rid of this code. Here is a key. Key is a variable represent name of the property in the object, and object is a variable that is the real object being iterated over. So let's say we have a person object, const person equal to name, and then age and address. So now we take this person and loop through using for in. So let's say we do console here, right? So let's refresh and see the output: name, age, address, because we are just trying to get the key, but we have to get the real value. So the way we do it is to pass person, use person object and access the properties using key. Now the output will be different. Say John, name and New York. So the loop iterates over each property of the person object and locks the key value pair to the console. The key variable represents the name, it is name of the each property in the object, and person key is used to access value of each property. And foreign loop is or should only be used with objects and not with arrays. When iterating over arrays, it's better to use for loop or one of the array iteration methods such as we have for each, map, reduce, all this. But when it comes to iterating over properties of an array, use foreign loop. This is all about foreign loop. Save it, refresh, done. Let's take a look at for off. This is also type of loop in JavaScript used to iterate over iterable objects such as arrays, string, maps and sets. And this works by looping through elements of an iterable or executing a block of code for each element. So we can say syntax for off. This is the syntax for off, where we have iterator is a variable represents each element in the iterable object, and this is an object itself is being iterated over. Let's say we have constant number equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So like let's iterate over numbers. Number, and then we say console log numbers and refresh it. See, you're iterating through array of numbers using for off statement. We don't have to mention this. This will work as well. So the loop iterates over each element of the numbers array and locks it to the console. The number is a variable represents each element in the array. So it is also important to note that for up loop should only be used with iterable objects and not with objects that are not iterable. When iterating over non-iterable object, it's better to use for in loop or other appropriate methods. It's an example of for off. Let's comment this one and move on to next one, which is while loop. So the while loop in JavaScript used to execute a block of code repeatedly while a specified condition is true. So the loop will continue to execute as long as the condition evaluates true. So the syntax for while loop is the condition is a Boolean expression that is evaluated before each iteration. And if the condition is true, the code block, whatever goes in here inside this loop is executed. If the condition is false, then the loop is exited. So I can say let pi equals 1, and I'll have a condition where I less than or equal to 5. Okay, let's print console.log pi and see how it works. Or I'll say 15 instead of. Just keep on going to stop it. And you would say I plus plus. So when we refresh, we see this result. Okay, this is an example of while loop. If I take this condition or remove this condition I plus plus, this loop will go potentially indefinitely until false. So I have to prevent. That's why I added this condition to make it false after certain iterations. Next we will talk about do while. while. So do while in JavaScript is similar to while loop, but this executes the code block at least once before checking the condition. Meaning the code block will always execute it at least once regardless whether the condition is true or false. Okay. So we can, the syntax for do while is do and while, and we will have a condition here. Okay. This is syntax for do while. The code block will be here. So let's say take an example that numbers or number we iterate or validate based on the user input if it is between 1 or 10. Okay. So number is equal to parse int. Okay, we have to prompt pop-up box with a text box. So we use prompt and it takes string enter a number between 1 and 10. So this is what we get when we refresh. So once we get a user input, we have to make sure the text box is not empty. Okay, number first, or the number less than 1 or number greater than 10, because we are asking user to enter numbers between 1 and 10. Let's refresh. So we see a pop-up saying enter number between 1 and 10. If I enter 0, so the condition did not become it's true. That's why it's going back, because 0 is less than 1, right? Suppose if I give 7 and click OK, then it becomes false, then gets out of the loop. So let's say again, if I say 25 and click OK, and because 25 is greater than 10, right? So if I say 4, then we're good. We can see console here as well, like console.log. Say you have entered plus number, and that will print a message in console. So in this example, what we learned is the code block prompts the user to enter a number between 1 and 10 using prompt function, and the parseInt function is used to convert the user input to a number. The loop will continue to execute as long as the user input is not number or less than 1 or greater than 10. If the user enter valid number, the loop will exit and the final line of code will be printed in the console. It's important to note one of the things about a do while loop is you gotta use this one in a situation where you want to execute code blocks at least once, like validating user input. So you gotta be very careful also when using do while, as you can potentially execute indefinite if condition which never becomes false at all. Okay, let's talk about break and continue in JavaScript. These are two control statements that we use to manipulate the flow of code execution inside the loop. We have already used break in switch case, right? So the break statement is to break out the loop and stop its execution even if the loop condition is still true. It is often be used when you have to find what you were searching for, or when a certain condition has been met and you want to exit the loop earlier or early. Let's say we have a for loop and then index say condition 10, say I don't want this now. Let's say if index is equal to 5, then we break, and then we say console log I index. Let's see what happens. See, once this condition is satisfied, we're breaking. There is no continuation 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So basically this only iterates from 0 to 4, right? Because the break statement executed when I is equal to 5. So it's a simple sample code for break, and we can take a look at continue. What happens continue? So in continue, it's basically a statement we use to skip over an iteration for a loop and move on to the next one. We often use this when we want to skip over certain elements in an array, or when like certain condition has been met and you want to move to the next iteration. That is, we just change this to continue. Okay. So what we are doing is, let's refresh. See, even if the condition is true, we are still continuing with the for loop. So the loop will iterate from 0 to 9. When I is equal to 5, the continue statement will execute, right? And the code inside loop for that iteration is skipped over. So 5 is not be printed. See, there is no 5 in the console. This is about continue. Whichever is true, that is skipped, and the loop will continue. Basically, the continue statement just breaks one iteration in a loop, whichever the specified condition meets, and then continues with the next iteration in the loop. Please subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so that you don't miss any video which are helping to learn coding and become a successful programmer. And I'll see you in next video.